Pull up. Altitude. Pull up, pull up. Altitude, altitude.
Alright pilots, Nick's here with another video, and we're going to get deeper into the A-10cII tank killer module of DCS. We've already gone through the video on how to cold start and align your hog and get it ready. So now we're going to taxi it to the runway, we're going to put it into the sky, we're going to fly it around a little bit, and then we're going to bring it to the most important part, bring it in and land it successfully without wrecking. Piece of cake, it won't be a problem. First we're going to get into a couple keybinds that you're going to need. We're not going to go through every keybind because that would take hours. So we're going to break up the keybinds by video. When we start going into Mavericks and so on, we're going to start getting into weapon systems. We're going to start showing those keybinds then. So for now, you're going to need a keybind for your flaps. On my HOTAS, I've got a three-way switch with a center basically. So up is up center, down is down center, and center, of course, is center center. And that is how I move my flaps. I've got my landing gear. I've got it bound here. I've got my nose wheel steering. You've got your throttle and your stick, which will, let's go to the axis really quick. So if you have a HOTAS, this is where you're going to get your roll and pitch. So that's your flight stick. You're going to have your throttle. The A-10 has two throttles. So if you only have a single, you just make it both of them. Above the throttle left and right, there's a both. And if you have split throttles that you can split, then you can do both those throttles separately. So you can control the engines separately. You're not going to split the throttles very much in an A-10 unless there's a problem. Other jets, like say a Tomcat, there is strategic value for splitting the throttles. There also the slew button is here. If you have a slew button set up for your HOTAS, this is where you'd bind that in. And of course your rudders. So if you have pedals, this is where you put in your pedals, or if you have an access lever like I do for your pedals, us disabled guys that don't use pedals at the moment, then this is where you'd bind your rudder. If you do not have a HOTAS, we can come down here to flight controls. And this is where you'll have your keyboard bindings where you can do, pitch up and down, so that's back and forward of your stick. You can do two buttons for that. Your bank left and right, which would be your ailerons, your rudder left and right. It's all right in here. Another thing you're going to want to have bound, which we'll just jump back out to all the bindings so we can just click through them, is a trim hat. So when you're flying any airplane, having a trim hat is very important. That way you don't have to sit there and hold your stick. If the wind's blowing really hard this way or your weight is out of balance, you're going to have to add a little aileron trim to keep your wings level and so on and so forth without holding the stick. So this is very important. Also, when you're doing on-speed landings, trim is very important for that as well. Because the trim can hold your position much more securely than you could do it with your hand. Your hand, you're a human being. There's unconscious oscillations you do with your limbs that you don't know. Like when you're using your head tracking and it feels like your head is sliding across the screen, you're probably actually just moving your head very, very slowly and you don't realize it. So trim is extremely important. You're going to want that. You're going to want your wheel brakes, which is the emergency disconnect lever for me. You can also, there's a wheel brake you can do, I believe, in the axis is if you have toe brakes. So here you go, you got your wheel brakes left and right. So if you have pedals, this is where you're going to bind that because it's pressure sensitive. But because I don't have pedals, I've got a 0 to 100 button. I just have to be careful with my brakes. That's just about all we're going to need to take off. You got your flaps, you got your gear, you got your sticks and rudders and all that stuff. So let's get ready to go here. So we've already started the aircraft up. We're ready to go now. So if you look down here below the dash, below your fire extinguisher system here, down here you'll see these little symbols here, and these, the only one we're going to worry about today is you turn on your nose wheel steering, and it says steering engaged when you hit it. What that does is that connects your nose wheel steering to your rudders. So now when we use our rudders, it's going to turn that front wheel. Piece of cake. This is how you're going to steer around when you're on the tarmac and taxiing around. Because your rudders only work when you're going fast enough that the airflow coming across them will affect it. Which, so you know, is about 70 knots. So you got to make sure before you start taxiing that your nose wheel steering is turned on, or else when you start driving and you use your rudder, you're not going to turn. You're going to keep going straight forward and possibly wreck. Okay, so nose wheel steering is on, so we're ready to go. Foot on the brakes, we'll give it a little bit of gas, and you know we don't go anywhere. The brakes will hold you at a little bit of gas, but if you get into your throttle too deep, your brakes are not going to be able to hold you. So the brakes in most airplanes are not that great. So always be mindful and be careful with your brakes. And we'll go through that a little bit with landing. You don't want to burn up your brakes when you're trying to land. Alright, so my feet are off the brakes. We're going to give it a little bit of throttle. We're going to use our rudder pedals to start steering. And we're going to taxi right on over to the runway. And that's just as simple as taxiing is. You don't want to get going too fast. Takes a little bit of throttle to get moving, but once you start moving, you can let the throttle come back. Right now I'm idle and I'm just coasting. And some jets can coast a lot better than others. Like a Tomcat can get away from you. You can give it a little bit of throttle and go pure idle, and you are still just gaining speed, really. Tomcats are fast, period. And if you're on it's no different when you're taxiing. They'll take off on you. So the Hog, we can just give it a little bit of throttle, then bring it back a little bit, and then just maintain. So we're using like 5% throttle there. So one thing to remember when you're taking off in any airplane is your landing gear speed. So tires are just made out of rubber. If they're spinning, you know, at 400 knots, they're going to explode. And the gear can only take so much of a hit when you're landing. So overspeeding your gear and smashing your gear are two things you have to worry about when you're landing. If you learn how to land properly, it's never going to be a worry because you're always going to be on speed. And we'll get into on speed here in a little bit before we land, so it'll make more sense then. But when you're taking off, you want to make sure that you start generating lift and rotating at the correct speeds of when your aircraft is ready to take off. You don't force an aircraft to take off. The aircraft takes off all by itself by your rotation. So when you say rotation, all someone means when they say I'm rotating is they're going to start gradually bringing the stick back. That is a rotation. And you're rotating the front of the plane up off the runway. An A-10 gets lift at about 150 knots. Give or take, depending on your loadout and how heavy you are. If you're really heavy, it might take a little bit more. If you're extremely light, it might be a little under 150. But if you start rotating at about 145 knots or 150 knots, you're going to start generating lift fairly quickly. So you don't have to yank the stick really hard. It's all gradual. You just gradually bring it back. You don't even have to bring it back all the way. You just gradually bring it back, bring it back. Right about here, I'm going to probably start generating lift if I'm doing over 150 knots. And you don't keep pulling back when you start generating lift. You kind of just hold it there and let the plane take itself off. No quick, jerky movements when it comes to flying. So here we go. I'm going to give it some gas with the brake on, just to make sure all my engines are good, all my pressures and everything are moving correctly as they should in tandem with each other. Then we're going to let off the brake and give it full throttle. We're going to use our pedals to maintain course straight on the runway as best we can. At about 70 knots, we're going to turn off the nose wheel steering, and that'll allow us to be a lot more smoother and straighter on the runway, actually, because then the rudders will actually take over, and we can control our left and right with just the rudders, which is a lot more casual. Whereas with the nose wheel steering being on, you have to be very careful with your rudder inputs because it actually turns the front wheel. So if you mash your rudder when your nose wheel steering is on and you're accelerating down the runway, you're going to have a bad time real quick. So your rudder movements have to be very small and precise. Once you turn off your nose wheel steering, you'll have a little bit more leeway in the rudder, but you still don't want to just jam it. Okay? Once we get to about 150 knots, I'm going to say rotating. I'm going to start pulling slowly back on the stick, and we're going to watch the nose come up nice and gradual, and then we're going to lift off. Once we get up, as soon as the wheels are off the ground, I'm going to hit my landing gear and bring it up immediately because we don't want to overspeed the gear. And I will keep my flaps down for a little bit. Usually I'll wait until I get up to about at least 190 or 200 knots before I bring the gear all the way up. Now, or the flaps, I mean. When you're taking off a hog, you go flaps down into the center. So one click down, that's going to be half flaps. Going all the way down is full flaps, and you're not going to use that until you're ready to land. So we'll go right here, and that's where we're going to keep it until we're airborne, the gear's all the way up, and we've got a decent amount of lift and airspeed. And then we'll bring the flaps up. Some people want to bring the flaps up right away. I usually let them stay down just a little bit. It just gives you a little bit more cushion. Sometimes, especially depending on your loadout and the wind conditions, if you bring up your gear and bring your flaps all the way up immediately, it can cause you to sink a little bit. Which you can counteract that. You just don't want to put yourself in that situation where you start pulling back on the stick too hard and possibly getting a stall warning or something of that nature. I try to do everything just as smooth as I possibly can. So here we go. Brakes are on. We're going to start spooling up. There's 80. We're good. Everything looks good. Yep, everything looks exactly the way it should. So here we go. Full throttle, brakes off. Nose wheel steering is on. Now we're just barely using the rudder just a little bit to maintain. Nose wheel steering is now off. There's 100. At about 145, 150, I'm going to start rotating. So, rotating. Whoop, there we go. Gears coming up. I'm going to start giving myself a little forward stick to try to level off a little bit. You don't want to just jump up into the air. You want to start getting some speed and maintaining. 200 knots, I'm going to bring up the flaps. And we are flying. So we can maintain about a 5 degrees nose up. Gradually gain altitude as we are heading out. So you can see we're doing about 248 knots and we're gaining speed at about 6 degrees nose up. Now, the engine on the Hog is not super powerful. It's not made to be super fast. It's made to be super fuel efficient. This is a mobile weapons truck platform. It's not a jet. So if you try to gain altitude, you want to do it gradually while you're gaining speed. At 270 knots, I've got a little bit more leeway to start pulling back and gaining more altitude, but if you watch, we're already losing airspeed pretty quick at just 10 degrees up. 10 degrees up, you're not going to maintain airspeed. You're going to start losing. So the Hog is not the best climber in the world by any means, but it does have good nose authority. It's got good turn ability. It is good at slow speeds for sure because of all the lift it generates, and it is a very stable weapons platform, which is what it's made for. So you can see we're maintaining now at about 7 degrees nose up, and now we're maintaining speed. So you can climb all day at 7 degrees and not worry about it. Although you might lose a little speed if you get really high, but you're not going to get super high in a Hog. You don't fly your Hog around at 30,000 feet. All right, now flying. Don't worry about your rudders when you're learning how to fly the Hog once you're in the air. You can learn how to do more advanced maneuvers later on, but just to fly, you can just use your stick and roll yourself over to the left a little bit. And you might want to pull back on the stick just a little bit or let it come back a little bit just to maintain level flight at the degrees nose up you want. And that's going to have you start turning. If you want to turn tighter, you can roll a little bit more and then start putting more back pressure on the stick. So you're basically rolling left and then pulling back, but instead of going up because you're laid over on your side, you're pushing the nose of the aircraft to that direction. Now there's ways to do coordinated turns to be more efficient using a mixture of rudder and aileron and elevator, but just for now, worry about rolling the aircraft and using your elevators to turn. Nice and smooth. You can turn a lot tighter with the Hog. You just have to be careful you don't pull too hard. You don't want to over-G it, and you don't want to stall out. If you start pulling really, really hard like this, we're still good, but you're going to hear a stall warning real soon, because what we're doing is we're going to start sliding into the air and losing all of our airspeed quickly. Just like that. So we can turn really tight, but you have to pay attention to your airspeed and your stall. So the only reason why I was able to maintain that turn as well as I was is because I was bringing the nose down a little bit at the same time to maintain airspeed while I was doing it. If your nose up and you start trying to pull that hard, you're going to dump pretty quick because you're going to blow all your airspeed. See that? Boom. I already went to a stall and I had to recover. So just take off, get used to flying your plane, get used to maneuvering, looking around, get the feel for it. The more you fly a plane, the more you'll get the feel for the flight model on the plane. And a lot of it will actually come almost intuitively once you start getting used to the flight. And that's all there is to take off your a hog and fly it around. Next, we're going to do a quick workshop on what it is to be on speed, and I'm going to go through that and explain it somewhat for you to give you a good grasp. We're not going to get too deep into the weeds with it, but we'll get you started. And then we're going to land the A-10 using on speed, and then you'll be all ready to go to start cold starting your A-10, aligning it, taking off, flying around, and landing. And it won't take any time, and you'll be able to do all that without any issue at all. You won't be afraid of that landing. A lot of people get worried or afraid of that landing. You'll be fine. It's a piece of cake. And I will see you in the skies in just a moment, pilots. Alright, pilots, here we are. We're up in the air. We can see that Makeup is right over there in the distance. We've got our waypoint set to Makeup, so we can see it nice and easy. So what we're going to do before we land this bird is we are going to explain on speed. So one of the things that people have trouble with hearing the term on speed is when they hear the words on speed, they immediately think it has to do with your airspeed, and it does not. So airspeed is a byproduct from being on speed. Never worry about the speed of your aircraft for the most part when you're coming in for a land. So if you look right here, there's going to be these three panels right here, and this is going to be your landing indicators for your AOA. AOA stands for angle of attack. So angle of attack is the degrees of pitch on your aircraft. So when you're coming in for a landing, like right now we're almost perfectly level, so this would be like 0 AOA, right? So if you're at like 7 degrees, that means the tail is down to about here and the nose is up to about here. So you're kind of pushing down into the air as you're coming down. And that's how you maintain your glide slope. So you're moving forward and moving down at a very controlled, minimal slow rate. So when you're coming in on speed, that means you're configured for landing, so your gear is out, which causes drag. Your flaps are set, which causes more drag but also generates more lift. And you have the angle of your nose up enough to where you have the correct angle of attack for landing and maintaining a glide slope to get there. So that means once you're set in those, you're on speed. And once you're on speed, then it's just a matter of getting your velocity vector onto the runway and then maintaining that glide slope and on speed all the way to the runway. At the end, you're going to add a little bit of flare and you're going to ease off the throttle a little bit to cushion your descent just a little bit more before you touch down so you don't drive right into the ground and slam your plane into the ground. So these little indicators right here, down here there'll be a little check mark. In the middle is a donut circle, and up here is an opposite check mark. So once we get the gear down and we get the flaps down, I will pause it again when we're doing the actual landing, and it'll show you these. So if the check marks are down here, that means you're going fast. If the circle is not here, that means you're not at the correct AOA angle. And if the check marks appear above here, that means you're going too slow. So eventually you'll want to have just the circle there, which means that your gear's down, your flaps are down, you're maintaining a proper speed for the air and the wind that you're coming down in, and you're at the correct AOA for your landing, and that'll be on speed. So what it basically means is when all those parameters are met, whatever your airspeed is to have all that happen is how fast you're going to go to land. You don't gauge how fast you're going to land by your airspeed. Because if there's a strong wind, a tailwind, you know, you're gonna probably come in a little bit faster to maintain your AOA. If the wind is in your face, you're probably going to be coming in slower to maintain a perfect AOA because you're generating more lift because the natural air, depending on the temperature, can change the speed. So that's why you don't worry about airspeed at all. You worry about getting set up for on speed, and then whatever your speed is your speed. Unless for some kind of odd reason it says your AOA is proper and everything's proper, but you're going so slow you're getting ready to stall out. But that's not going to happen. So again, on speed is the angle, your angle of attack, mixed with your speed, airspeed. So this little thing right here, this is your velocity vector. So that circle is where your plane is heading to. It's not where it is, it's where it's going to be. So when we're in a landing and we're on speed, this is probably going to be below your pitch line because you're not going to be going straight forward, you're going to be going downward because you're on a glide slope. So you don't worry about that. You just try to maintain on speed, and you can level off your flight velocity vector so that you're not gaining or decreasing in altitude while you're setting up on speed if it makes you feel if you need to do that. Like I can set up a plane for on speed and then just fly level as in not descending or ascending. But it's going to look weird because I'm going to be flying at a weird angle, but that's what on speed would be. So once you're on speed, you're just going to steer this velocity vector onto the front of the runway. Once you're on speed, you're no longer going to be pushing or pulling your stick to control your altitude. You're going to be on speed, so you're going to be going forward and down at the correct pace. So if your velocity vector is below the runway, you're going to increase your throttle, which will increase your speed. And that'll bring your velocity vector up on the runway. If it starts getting too high, you're going to lower your speed, and that's going to bring your velocity vector back down. And that is how you land an aircraft. You don't do it by steering with your stick onto the runway. Once you're on speed, you'll use your stick left and right. If you need to recorrect, your roll a little bit, if you need to come back to the left a little bit, you might roll a little bit to the left, but you're not going to pull back or forward on the stick unless you absolutely have to. You're going to let your throttle do all that. When you're landing an aircraft, there's a lot of this going on. You're going to jockey your throttle a lot. You're going to have to get used to that, because that's how you control your velocity vector in your landing once you're on speed. You're going to do it with your throttle. Again, more throttle is going to bring the velocity vector up, and it's also going to eliminate those downward check marks. And vice versa. If it's too high, lowering your speed is going to bring your velocity vector down, and it's also going to change your check marks as well. I'm sorry. I have medical issues. Sometimes I get stuck on words. But anyway, that is a basic description of on speed. And you can use this for every aircraft that has a velocity vector when you're landing. And most aircraft are also going to have the symbols for your AOA when you're coming in. So once you know how to set up an aircraft with on speed, you can jump into an aircraft you've never flown before, and you can bring your gear down, slow down if you're going too fast, you'll overspeed the gear. So you got to make sure you're not going too fast when you bring your gear down. In an A-10, you can bring your gear down at around 170 knots, you'll be fine. You're not going to damage the gear. 180 knots, even 200 knots, you can bring the gear down. I usually wait till I'm a little slower than that before I bring the gear down, depending, but it won't damage the gear. If you're going super fast and you're in a jet and you bring the gear down, you're going too fast, you're going to break the gear. Also, if you land too hard, you can break the gear. Also, if you're taking off and you haven't rotated and got off the runway fast enough, you can break your tires in here because you overspeed them. So those are things to keep in mind, but we're not going to get too deep into that because we're just going to do an on-speed landing, a little bit of flare at the end, and land nice and soft. And you'll be able to do this with any aircraft once you get used to it. So that's about all we're going to get into with on speed for this. I don't want to drown the video out with 30 minutes of on speed, but that is the basic gist of it. And just before we land here, what I'm going to do is before we go to the landing tutorial, we are just going to go on speed right now. So I'm going to unpause the video. And give me a second, I got to get this thing trimmed out because I was not flying before this. Alright, so we're nice and level. We're going kind of fast, so I'm going to let out the throttle now. We're going to start slowing down. And when we do the landing, I'm going to do this in real time, and we're going to get on speed and go to the runway, and we're going to land. And I'll talk through it the whole way. But just before that, let's just go ahead and get set up on speed so you understand what I mean. Alright, so now we're down to 220 knots. We're slowing down. We can go ahead and drop the gear now. Okay, so now you see the check marks there, and we know we're going kind of fast because we are going 190. On speed is going to be much slower than that, but our speed is coming down. Let's go ahead and bring our flaps all the way down now. You can see I'm slowly bringing the nose up while I'm slowing down. I'm going to give it a little bit of throttle so I don't start falling out of the sky. Okay, now you can see our angle is almost proper now. You see with the circle? That means our angle of attack is correct, or it's in the vicinity of correct. And now our speed says we're about correct. So right here, we are on speed. And if you look outside, you can see that we have that angle on our aircraft now. So this is our on-speed landing. So if we wanted to right now, we could pull back on the stick a little bit more and give it more throttle. And now you can see we're bringing up our velocity vector, right? So now I'm no longer descending, but I'm still on speed, and I'm doing that with the throttle. Now we're going a little fast, but that's okay, because we're not trying to descend now. And that is all there is to just being on speed. I can lower the throttle a little bit. I can stop pulling back on the stick as much to make sure I'm going to start descending, and you'll see that we're going to get a full donut soon enough, just like that. There you go. So now, if we had the runway in front of us and we were flying to it, we would just get this velocity vector onto the runway, and then we would be jockeying our throttle to maintain the velocity vector onto our landing spot. Just like that. And when we got to the end, we would just give it a little bit more, we'd give it a little bit more flare at the end, just like that. Not a ton, just a little bit. And then we'd kill the throttle slowly and let the rear tires come down nice and soft. It's really that easy. Other aircraft, when you're coming in a lot faster, have more symbology on the HUD, and we'll get into that when we do those aircraft. For the A-10, it's just a matter of watching your on-speed indicator and using your velocity vector just to tell your aircraft where it's going to go, and using your throttle to maintain that. I don't trim out the A-10 for it, but you can, once you get it where you want it, you can be trimming it to on-speed. So right now I'm just using the stick to hold on speed, but you can actually use your trimmer and keep trimming the nose up slowly, and then you can get it to where it maintains on speed just the way you want it, and then you can just roll to turn the aircraft while you're on speed. You just have to be really careful because you're only doing 120 knots, so if you're going to maneuver and turn, you got to be real careful like this. Maybe give it a little bit of more throttle just to make sure. You can't just whip it around when you're going this slow. So I'd also recommend, especially with the A-10s, until you're really used to it, don't set up perfectly on speed until you're flying right at the runway. And we're going to get it out here in just a second. I'm going to pause it, and we're going to switch over, and we're going to land this sucker now. And everyone's going to be able to do this. You're not going to have any problem. Trust me, piece of cake. It might seem daunting when you first start landing airplanes. Don't worry about it. Just keep trying, and trust me, it's going to get super easy after a little while. You won't even know why it was hard in the first place. I'll see you in a minute, guys. Alright, pilots, here we go. Little DCS magic, little PC magic. We're back in the sky. We got Maycop off to our left, a little ways out there. We're a few miles out. Normally you would call in the ATC and all that jazz. We're not going to do any of that. We're just going to go over here and we're going to land this plane. We're going to use an on-speed landing. I've already described that to you, so here we go. We're going to unpause it. Get trimmed out here. For some reason, starting on a hot start in the air likes to make your trim pretty funky. you got to be careful with it. All right, so there we are. There's the runway. We're going to start slowing down right now. Not worried about slowing way down yet because we're a little ways out. We're a little ways out. We're just going to fly right up here a little ways. We're going to hang a left. We're going to fly right into the runway. Once I can see the runway, we're going to slow down even more, and we're going to get set up on speed. And then we're going to glide our bird right onto the ground. Also, when you're coming in on speed is just the setting up the plane. So if you're really high up in the air, so you're way too high to be coming into that runway, that would make your glide slope once you're on speed and you get your velocity onto the runway very steep. And it's just going to take some time to kind of learn that. But if you're really high, it's going to make your glide slope really steep and you're going to come in way too low. If you're too low, then you're going to have trouble coming to the runway without running out of space and coming down here. And that's just going to take you a little bit of know-how. You get the feel of it. Don't come in extremely high. Don't come in extremely low. If you're somewhere in that vicinity of, somewhere around 800 feet, 1,200 feet, something like that, you're okay to come in on a glide speed. If you're at 4,000 feet, you set up on speed at 4,000 feet, you get your velocity vector from only a few miles away from the runway onto the runway, you're coming in way too steep. And you should be able to see that. Alright, makeup, we can see our cake right there is makeup, so the runway should be right up here. Bring the air brakes out and start slowing down now. There's the runway, we can see it. And the air brake's going to slow us down nice and quick. Okay, brakes are going to come out. I'm going to bring the air brakes in now. Because once you get the gear down, that's going to make you nice. That's going to slow you down all by itself. We don't need the air brakes out. Sometimes you use the air brakes, especially if it's a really windy day when you're coming down. We're not going to get into that tonight. Alright, we're going to bring the flaps down. Which the flaps will not come all the way down right away if you're going too fast. It'll wait and it'll come down all the way once you're slow enough. So right now I'm just kind of cruising towards the runway and letting my speed come down. I'm actually going to bring the air brake out now though, just to slow down a little bit more. And when I land, we're going to grab the keybind for that air brake. Alright, flaps are coming all the way down now, and you can see our velocity vector bumped up even more. Now the air brakes are coming in. I'm going to start giving you a little bit of gas.
Springfield 1, Overlord 1-1.
So now you can see we're closer to on speed.
450 at 7,000
Just
knots.
bringing the throttle back out and slowly bringing the nose back up even more. We're a little steep, we're a little high. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the nose a little bit. I'm giving it no gas. I'm just going to glide it in a little bit more to come down. I'm not worried about being completely on speed right now because we've got a ways to go. You just need to make sure you're on a good glide slope near the end. And once you're getting ready to land, you need to make sure you have proper AOA and a little bit of flare. Alright, so we need to start bringing the nose up now to slow down a little bit more.
Altitude, altitude.
Alright, and now we are on speed. I'm going to give it some throttle now. As you see, our velocity vector is sinking below the runway, so we need to bring it back up. I'm maintaining the AOA, and I'm goosing the throttle just a little bit to bring the velocity up, the vector up. Now at the end here, I'm just going to pull back on the stick a little bit more, and I'm going to let off the throttle completely. And there we go. Piece of cake. Now let's pause this for just a second, and because I used the air brake and we didn't go through that keybind, right here under your HOTAS it says HOTAS speed brake aft and forward. So that's a two-way. One of them brings the air brakes out, the other one brings the air brakes back in. The air brakes in the A-10 is when your ailerons open up like that. You can see it opens them up big and fat. It's a very good air brake. It slows you way down. If you need to do a gunshot and you're coming in and you're coming in pretty hot, you can bring out your air brakes to slow your aircraft down to give you a little bit more time on station on that gunshot. So once you're down now, you're just gonna let the aircraft slow down. Once you get down to a certain speed, you can pull back a little bit on your stick, just try to slow it down a little bit more, and you can slowly start giving it some brake pressure if you have toe brakes. If you have push button brakes, you just want to give it a little brake and then let off. That way you're not gonna lock up your tires or skid around. Once you get down below 70 knots, you can turn your nose wheel steering on and then you can steer the aircraft like normal, and then you just drive off the runway, and you just landed your A-10. So again, all I did was turn into the runway, brought out my air brakes to start slowing down. Normally I wouldn't have to use the air brakes so much, but I'll tell you why. It's because I have no load on here. I'm completely clean. I don't have a lot of fuel in here. We're extremely light, and that's why I had to use the air brake so much. A lot of times you're not going to use the air brake, but I usually use the air brake just to slow down initially, and then once I get down to like 140 knots or so and I'm starting to set up for on speed, I'll go ahead and let the air brakes come back in. Because then your gear's out, your flaps are down, you should be able to maintain a good AOA speed without using the air brake after that. But not always, so the air brake's a tool you can use. So again, remember, get set up on AOA, get your velocity vector onto the runway, use your throttle to maintain it there. If you're coming in too steep, just go ahead and fly down a little bit farther, and then bring the nose back up onto speed once you get down lower, and get set back up on AOA, and then get your vector into the landing point you want to land at, and do the same thing. Near the end, just give it a little bit more back pressure on the stick to flare just a little bit, and then ease off your throttle completely and just let the aircraft come down and kiss the runway all on its own. You don't want to fly it into the runway. When it comes to flying things into the runway, that's Navy aircraft, and we'll get into that later when you want to learn how to land on an aircraft carrier and do an on-speed Navy landing. That's also why Navy aircraft have such thick, robust gear that can take a lot more damage, is because they're made to land on aircraft carriers where you do not flare and have nice little landings. You set up on speed at the landing location where the cables are, and you fly that sucker right into it. Not by steering into it, but by getting set up on AOA and then using your throttle to keep your flight vector directly onto your landing spot. And once you get really good at landing on speed, I'll tell you right now, it's going to make landing Navy on an aircraft carrier a lot easier to grasp and get better at. Because that's what landing on a carrier is all about. Just getting set up on speed and then steering your flight vector into your landing section of the aircraft carrier. So, thanks for hanging out, everybody. I hope this was a decent amount of information for you. This should get you taxiing, taking off flying, and landing your A-10 pretty quick. If you're having trouble, just keep practicing. You can look up more advanced lessons if you want, but this is enough to get you started. The on-speed is really the main thing. I suggest you really practice on speed, practice getting on speed while you're just flying around, practice flying other aircraft on speed when you're landing them, and just see how much easier it'll be if you, once you really fully grasp and understand the mechanics of that. I will see everybody later. Thanks for watching the video. More videos coming up soon with the A-10C. We're going to get into keybinds, and then we're going to start getting into navigation systems, weapon systems, all that good stuff.